Wanderer of the Wasteland by Zane Grey, Chapter 23, Part 3. Jeannie, I must be honest with you, replied Adam. I've got to be parents, brother, sister, friend, everybody to you. And I'll fall short sometimes in spite of my intentions. But I'll be honest, and the fact is it seems to be a sad truth that men and man-birds and man-creatures generally are all very much alike. If they want anything, they want it badly. And when they fall in love, they do act funny. They will do anything. They show off, beg, bully, quarrel, are as nice and as sweet as sugar. And they'll fight, too, until they get their particular wives. Then they become natural like they were before. It's my idea, Jeannie, that all the wives of creation should demand always the same deportment which won their love. Don't you agree with me?
I do, you bet. That's what I'll have. But will I ever be falling in love?
The eyes that looked into Adam's then were to him as the wonder of the world. Of course you will, someday, when you grow up.
With you?
She asked in dreamy speculation. Oh, Jeannie, not me. Why, I'm too old. I'm old enough to be your dad.
You're not old,
she replied with a finality that admitted of no question.
But if you were, and still like you are, what difference would it make?
Like I am? Well, Jeannie, how's that? He queried curiously.
Oh, so big and strong, you can do so much with those hands, and your voice sort of quiet something inside me. When I lie down to sleep knowing you're there under the cottonwood, I'm not afraid of the dark, and your eyes are just like an eagle's. Oh, you needn't laugh. I've seen eagles. An Indian here once had two. I used to love to watch them look, but then their eyes were never kind like yours. I think when I get big, I'll go falling in love with you.
Well, little girl, that's a long way off, said Adam, divided between humor and pathos. But let's get back to natural history. A while ago you mentioned a bird called a roadrunner. That's not as well known a name among desert men as chaparral cock. You know, out in the desert there are no roads. This name roadrunner comes from a habit, and it's a friendly habit of the bird running along the road ahead of a man or wagon. Now, the roadrunner is the most wonderful bird of the desert. And that is saying a great deal. Jeannie, tell me all you know about him.
Oh, I know all about him, declared Jeannie brightly. There's one lives in the mesquite there. I see him every day, lots of times. Before you came, he was very tame. I guess now he's afraid, but not so afraid as he was. Well, he's a long bird with several very long feathers for a tail. It's a funny tail, for when he walks, he bobs it up and down. His color is speckled, gray and brown and white. I've seen dots of purple on him, too. He has a top knot that he can put up and lay down as he has a mind to. When it's up, it shows some gold color, almost red underneath. And when it's up, he's mad. He snaps his big bill like, oh, I don't know what like, but it makes you shiver. I've never seen him in the water, but I know he goes in because he shakes out his feathers and picks himself and sits in the sun. He can fly, only he doesn't fly much. But, oh, how he can run like a streak. I see him chase lizards across the sand. You know how a lizard can run? Well, no lizard ever gets away from a roadrunner. There's a race, a fierce little tussle in the sand, a snap. And then old Killer Roadrunner walks proudly back, carrying the lizard in his bill. If it wasn't for the way he kills and struts, I could love him, for he was very tame. He used to come right up to me. But I never cared for him as I do for other birds.
Jeannie, you've watched a roadrunner all right. I didn't imagine you knew so much. Yes, he's a killer, a murderer, but no worse than other desert birds. They all kill. They're all fierce, and if they weren't, they'd die.
Now, I want to tell you the most wonderful thing a roadrunner does. He'll fight and kill and eat a rattlesnake. No, honest Injun, cried Jeanie. Yes, I've watched many a battle between a roadrunner and a rattlesnake, and nearly all of those battles were won by the birds. But that is not the most wonderful thing a roadrunner does. I'll tell you, I've never seen this thing myself, but a friend of mine, an old prospector named Dismukes, swears it's true. And he knows more about the desert than any man I ever met, and he wouldn't tell a lie. Well, here's what he says. He says he saw a roadrunner come upon a sleeping rattlesnake, but he didn't pounce upon the snake. It happened to be that the snake slept on the sand near some bushes of cholla cactus. You know how the dead cones fall off and lie around? This wonderful bird dragged these loose pieces of cactus and laid them close together in a circle all around the rattlesnake. Built a fence around him, pinned him in. Now, I can vouch for how a rattlesnake hates cactus. Then the fierce bird flew up and pounced down upon the snake, woke him up. The rattlesnake tried to slip away, but everywhere he turned was a cactus, which stuck into him and over him the darting, picking bird. So round and round he went, striking as best he could, but he was unable to hit the bird, and every pounce upon him drew the blood. You've heard the snap of that big long beak? Well, the rattlesnake grew desperate and began to bite himself. And what with his own bites and those of his enemy, he was soon dead. And then the beautiful, graceful, speckled bird proceeded to tear and devour him. I'll bet it's true, ejaculated Jenny. A roadrunner could and would do just that. Very likely. It's strange and perhaps true. Indeed, the desert is the place for things impossible anywhere else. Why do birds and beasts kill and eat each other? Asked Jeanie. It is nature, Jeanie. Nature could have done better. Why don't people eat each other? They do kill each other. And they eat animals. But isn't that all? Jeanie, some kinds of people, cannibals in the South Seas and savages, do kill and eat men. It is horrible to believe. Dismukes told me that he came upon a tribe of Indians on the west coast of Sonora in Mexico. That's not more than 400 miles from here. He went down there prospecting for gold. He thought these savages, the Seri Indians, they're called, were descended from cannibals and sometimes ate man flesh themselves. No one knows but that they do it often. I've met prospectors and travelers who scouted the idea of the Seris being cannibals, but I've heard some bad stories about them. Dismukes absolutely believed that in a poor season for meat, if chance offered, they would kill and eat a white man. Prospectors have gone into that country never to return. I never starve, but I'd never get that hungry. I'd die. Wouldn't you? Indeed, I would. And so during the leisurely hours that grew more and longer as the hot summer season advanced, Adam led Jeanie nearer to nature, always striving with his observations to reach the truth, however stern, and to instruct and stimulate her growing mind. All was not music of birds and perfume of flowers and serene summer content at the rosy dawns and the golden sunsets. The desert life was at work. How hard to reconcile the killing with the living. But when Adam espied an eagle swooping down from the mountain heights, its wings bowed and its dark body shooting so wondrously, then he spoke of the freedom of the lonely king of birds and the grace of his flight and the noble spirit of his life. Likewise, when Adam heard the honk of wild geese, he made haste to have Jeanie see them winging wide in triangular flight across the blue sky to the north. He told her how they lived all the winter in the warm south, and when spring came, a wonderful instinct bade them rise and fly far northward to the reedy banks of some lonely lake, and there gobble and honk and feed and raise their young. On another day, and this was in drowsy June, when all the air seemed still,
he was roused from his siesta by cries of delight from Jeanie. She knelt before him on the sand, and in one hand she held a beautiful horned toad, and the other hand she stretched out to Adam. "Look, oh look," she cried ecstatically, and her eyes then rivaled the jeweled eyes of the desert reptile. Some dark red drops of bright liquid showed against the brown of Jeanie's hand. "There, it's blood. I picked him up as I had all the others so many hundreds of times, only this time I felt something warm and wet. I looked at my hand. There, he had squirted the drops of blood, and oh, I was quick to look at his eyes. One was still wet and bloody. I know he squirted the drops of blood from his eyes." Thus Adam had confirmed for him one of the mysteries of the desert. Dismukes had been the first to tell Adam about the strange habit of the horned toad ejecting blood from their eyes. One other desert man, at least, had corroborated Dismukes, but Adam, who had seldom passed a horned toad without picking it up to gaze at the wondrous coloration and to see it swell and puff, had never come upon the peculiar phenomenon. And horned toads on his trails had been many. To interest Jeanie, he built her a corral of flat stones in the sand, and he scoured the surrounding desert for horned toads. What a miscellaneous collection he gathered. They all had the same general scalloped outlines and tiny horns, but the color and design seemed to partake of the physical characteristics of the spot where each was found. If they squatted in the sand and lay still, it was almost impossible to see them. So remarkable was their protective coloration. Adam turned the assortment over to Jeanie with instruction to feed them and play with them and tease them in the hope that one night, sometime, eject drops of blood might come from their eyes. When it actually happened, Jeanie's patience was rewarded. Adam's theory that the reward of the faithful desert watcher would always come was exemplified in more than one way. Jeanie had never seen or heard of a tarantula wasp. She had noticed big and little tarantulas, but of the fierce winged dragonfly hawk of the desert, the tarantula wasp, she had no knowledge. Adam, therefore, had always kept a keen lookout for one. They were up in the canyon on a hot June day, resting in the shade of the rustling palms. A stream babbled and splashed over the stones, and that was the only sound to break the dreaming silence of the canyon. All at once, Adam heard a low whir, like the hum of tiny wings. As he turned his head, the sound became a buzz. Then he espied a huge tarantula wasp. Quickly he called to Jeanie, and they watched. It flew around and around about a foot from the ground, a fierce-looking yet beautiful creature, with a yellow body and blue gauzy wings. It was fully 2 inches and more long. "He sees a tarantula, now watch," whispered Adam. Suddenly the wasp darted down to the edge of a low bush into some coarse grass that grew there. Instantly came a fierce whiz of wings like the buzz of a captured bumblebee, only much louder and more vibrant. Adam saw the blades of grass tumble. A struggle to the death was going on in there. Adam crawled over a few yards, drawing Jeanie with him, and they saw the finish of a terrific battle between the wasp and a big, hairy tarantula. "There, it's over and the tarantula is dead," said Adam. "Jeanie, I used to watch this kind of desert fight and not think much more about it. But one day I made a discovery. I had a camp over here and I watched a tarantula wasp kill a tarantula. I didn't know it then, but this wasp was a female ready to lay her eggs. Well, she rolled the big spider around until she found a place that suited her. Then she dug a hole, rolled him into it, covered him over, and flew away. I wondered then why she did that. I went away from that camp, and after a while I came back, and then one day I remembered about the wasp burying the tarantula. And so just for fun and curiosity, I found the grave. It was near the end of a stone, and I opened it up. What do you think I discovered?
Tell me,
exclaimed Jeanie breathlessly. I found the tarantula almost eaten up by a lot of tiny wasps, as much like worms as wasps. Then I understood that tarantula wasp had killed the tarantula, laid her eggs inside his body, tumbled him into his grave, and covered him over. By and by those eggs hatched, and the little wasps ate the tarantula, lived and grew, and after a while came out full-fledged tarantula wasps like their mother. End of chapter 23.